Okay, we're going to take a look at some consumer research now and the implications that it raises for the advertising industry. And to lead us through that, we have Rich Astley, who is the Global Chief Product Officer at Finecast, and he's joined by David Scott, who's Research and Analysis for Service Providers and Platforms at IHS Markit. So welcome to both of you, and give them a hand of applause, please.
Great. Excellent. All right, well, thanks, guys. Thanks, Rich, for partnering up with IHS Markit on this. Much appreciated. Thanks, Justin, for the invite today to come along. So today I'll be talking about the future of connected TV devices in Australia. But before I do so, I'd like you just to think about your own household and how many devices you've got in there. If it's anything like mine, you've got the smart TV in the lounge room, the kids are probably connected up, they've got the console connected up. Well, in the case the husband, wife, partner have a smartphone that's in the kitchen. PC could be in the study, and numerous other devices are set across in the household. But that's where we're currently at the moment. So what we're looking at today, and importantly, is where we'll be in 5 years' time. So let's have a look at a snapshot. There'll be 2.7 smartphones per household by the end of 2022. This is up slightly from 2.6 at the end of last year. Every house will own a smart TV. Half of households will have a connected games console. And around a third of homes will have a digital media adapter or an internet-connected streaming device or stick, such as an Apple TV or a Chromecast. Okay, but how will we get there? So let's look at that now. Smart TVs are going to lead this growth, up 67% to 11 million from 6.3 million at the end of this year. That's going to be an impressive growth of around 14% compounded annually over the next 5 years. The largest base, though, goes to the smartphone. The smartphone will be increasing from 25 to around 28 million devices by the end of 2028. But not all devices will grow. We expect PCs, tablets, and Blu-ray disc players to decline. In terms of percentages, the greatest decline will be the tablet, down 29%, or an average decline rate of around 8% per annum. The tablet itself suffers from being in a not very well-defined market. It's probably the best way to put it. So it's being squeezed by large phones, smartphones that have got ever larger screens, and at the other end we've got smart TVs, which are getting smarter with more apps inbuilt. Okay, so what do we take from this? Well, the growth in smart TVs will reinforce the importance of the TV. But we wanted to take a look at what it meant now. So we went out and we surveyed 2,401, everyone's important, and we did a nationally representative survey across gender, across age and location. Every state was included, including right here in New South Wales. I will say, though, that it was an online survey, a device agnostic one, but meaning that the respondents were more likely to own a device or an OTT service. So what did we find? Well, we found the smart TV in terms of usage was a preference for around a third. A first choice, in fact, for around a third of all respondents that were surveyed. We wanted to also know just about the frequency of this use, though. It's all right to say that that was the first choice, but was it being used often? Around half of all respondents were using the smart TV multiple times a day. Furthermore, around 30% was using it once a day. So we can infer from this that around 80% of people are using their smart TV at least once a day. But the smart TV has also got its importance in terms of functionality to consumers. Whilst we found that around a third didn't have any device connected to their primary TV set, I draw your attention to the games console and the set-top box and the digital media adapter, that around a quarter of people do have a device connected to their primary TV set. But it's one thing to have it connected to the primary TV set, but how's it being used? Well, we saw that around 28% was for the games console was connected. However, only 10% of people are using it actually to watch their TV and video content. So, not surprisingly, the games console was being used to play games, predominantly. But whereas the inbuilt smart TV services and apps being used by a quarter of the connected devices, similarly, we saw a higher rate for the Freeview and Pay TV set-top boxes. Okay, so we got the results in, and that was looking at more of an overall approach, but we wanted to see if this applied to everyone. So we looked at the demographics of this, and we looked at by age groups. So the ownerships of living room devices, we can see, is greater in the younger generation, just under 6 devices being owned by the 18 to 24-year-olds, and just over 1 of them is connected to the primary TV set. But the important takeaway here is to look at the older generation. The age group around 55 to 64, they still own over 4 devices, and almost 1 of them is connected to the TV as well. So thereby still being important consumers of with number of devices in that age group. Okay, so then we looked at ownership by device type across different age groups. Probably not surprisingly, the younger generation was most likely to own each type of these devices, the games consoles, DVD Blu-ray players, the DMAs and the smart TVs. The one exception here though is to note was the Pay TV set-top box, which was most likely to be owned by the older generation, well, I should say 55 to 64-year-olds. And that's perhaps the legacy of the traditional pay TV services and the take-up that they've had over the years, with the device still remaining in the house and continuing to pay for subscriptions. And finally, I just want to draw your attention to, if the device is in the living room and connected to the TV set, how's it being used? So we can see that 40% in the 25 to 34-year-old age group connect up the games console to the primary TV set, so thereby implying that they're using it to play games. Conversely, 10% in the 55 to 64 are not really gamers. But in that category, we'll also draw your attention to they don't have any device connected. 45%, just under none there, for the 55 to 64-year-old age group, thereby relying on the inbuilt apps of their smart TV. Basically turn on the TV and using that to operate to what they're watching. So this is kind of part 1 of the presentation. Like now, it's my pleasure to pass it on to Rich, who's going to talk about the implications for TV advertising.
Thanks, David. And just to quickly introduce myself, I'm unfortunately not the 80s pop star that you were probably hoping for, but I do look after products and technology at Finecast. So what I wanted to do was really just sort of take some of the findings from the research from IHS Markit and just take a look at what the long-term implications are for addressable TV advertising, specifically here in Australia. So the good news, obviously, is that as we've seen from David's presentation, the television isn't going anywhere soon, which is great to hear. They're obviously going to get smarter And increasingly, we're going to see viewers connecting peripheral devices to the TV to browse and to navigate content. But there are some kind of key trends that I wanted to pull out that I think we should all kind of be aware of over the next few years. The first one is kind of the obvious one. We've heard this a lot this morning, which is as we see devices start to fragment and new devices come into the fore, it's going to put more and more strain on linear TV viewing. Clearly, we're going to see more of a shift towards on-demand viewing. Secondly is we're going to see new viewing platforms and new subscription models continue to evolve. So ad-supported, AVOD, SVOD, and then even hybrid services, as we talked about with Hulu this morning. There will be new entrants to the TV marketplace. There already are. Businesses that were historically in the distribution game that are now very much in the content game. So Amazon being a great example, acquiring rights for Thursday Night Football in the States, Premier League in the UK, and of course tennis. And of course advanced advertising products are going to continue to come into the market as we see devices and boxes start to become more addressable and data to start to become more and more accessible. And lastly, all of this is going to put a lot of strain on traditional measurement currencies. That's not to say they're going to go away, it just means to say they're going to be forced to evolve very quickly as we start to get more and more census-based data for audiences, but also as we start to get a better read on business outcomes and ROI. And of course, underpinning all of this is an acceleration of change that means that evolution is a business imperative in the TV game right now. But all of this starts with choice, and the experience of viewing TV has really never been better before. We arguably have the best choice of quality content we've ever had from both the traditional broadcast space as well as the new global platforms. Access to content is as easy as it's ever been, with new ways to watch shows where you want and when you want to watch them. We're seeing continued innovation from distribution platforms, both free and paid for, as standards improve and competition heats up. And lastly, devices are just getting better and cheaper. So for example, for $70 now, you can buy an Amazon Fire TV stick and you can use your voice to search content across apps, which a few years ago was just kind of completely unthinkable. Our business here in Australia launched late last year, and we've been lucky enough to see a fantastic response from advertisers here. What's interesting though is that we're seeing a real response to addressable in many different ways in terms of the ways that advertisers are engaging with addressable. So I think Kim this morning talked about the fact that the fear is with addressable we go down to this world of hyper-targeting. That's not what we're seeing. What we're seeing is lots of different ways of using data and accountability to drive outcomes. So the most common examples I'm going to take you through are, first of all, segmentation, which is where we're seeing typically most brand advertisers starting to use their segmentation of their different products and services and starting to use their creative in more intelligent ways. Secondly is incremental reach. So as we start to get a better view on measurement into multi-platform TV through VOZ and VPM, we'll start to see where we can drive incremental reach to linear. And clearly, if you're looking for those rating points, there's a strong argument to say that we can find more people in on-demand environments. Thirdly is custom, where we are truly building audiences from the ground up based on combinations of different data sources. Fourthly is drive time and proximity, and this has been a really we've had a phenomenal kind of pickup here, which is particularly around kind of retail and automotive, where we're able to ring fence physical environments and target within a drive time of a particular location is driving a huge amount of interest for advertisers right now. And then lastly is first party. So where advertisers have those data assets and are able to use them is using first party data on the television. And of course, that means we now also start to really challenge the way that we measure some of these tactics as well. So of course, we're still measuring audience and we're measuring reach and frequency, but there are now a wider range of solutions to measure effectiveness. So here are some real life examples for you. Firstly, for the launch of a new car model in the UK, we were able to drive a 10% uplift in favourability for the exposed group, based on the fact that we were able to determine which households we did and did not reach with our particular campaign. Secondly, and I'll show you a short video in a moment actually to explain this in more detail, but we were also able to drive 2% incremental footfall for a furniture retail brand store by targeting specific drive times around their retail locations. Where reach is the objective, we've been able to prove incrementality to linear TV via a cross-media study with Millward Brown. And lastly, for a budget airline, we were able to prove a 5% uplift in ticket sales to an exposed audience. Now, looking at some of these numbers, they may not appear enormous, but all of these were deployed as quite small, tactical proof of concept tests. So for a lot of these advertisers, actually the first time they'd ever spent in addressable TV. So I'm not going to disclose the budget numbers here, but they were small. So they're driving quite a decent return for a small amount of incremental money into TV. So now I'm just going to show you a very quick video, and I'm sorry this is a UK case study. I was really hoping to have an Australian one ready for you, which we will soon. But this is for DFS, a furniture retailer in the UK. So as we talked a lot this morning, it's a really exciting time at the moment, in particular for addressable TV advertising. And I just wanted to very quickly take you through some of the kind of headline technology developments that we're seeing at the moment. The first one is set-top boxes. And the kind of key trends here is, first of all, as we've seen from IHS, they continue to grow. So we've got a 19% 5-year growth rate. Boxes are getting better, they're getting smarter, they're getting more intuitive, the navigation in them is improving. So the latest generation of boxes is really kind of changing the game. Secondly is connected TV applications. So connected devices or peripherals is also growing considerably, so 28% over 5 years. And this is where we're seeing a lot of the innovation taking place at the moment. So this is where you've got the likes of Amazon, Apple, obviously, Roku, who are building fantastic technology that is quick, is easy, with brilliant navigation, and obviously is very inexpensive. Linear TV ad insertion is also, we're seeing huge amounts of innovation here as well. So everything from automated content recognition, where the TV is connected to the internet and it's able to actually detect when a break is coming up, through to new broadcasting standards that will completely change how we understand free-to-air broadcasts, such as DVB and ATSC 3.0 in North America. So in 2, probably 3 years' time, we'll start to see broadcast becoming kind of increasingly like the internet and become more of a two-way broadcast message. And then lastly, of course, is screens or TV screens out of the home. And there are an increasing number of screens in pubs, in bars, in travel locations, where we are able to get pretty targeted down to a location and still reach people in a very engaging long-form TV environment. So lastly, just to kind of summarize this in what we think is the framework for growth here. And we look at this a lot. So we're growing Finecast around the world at the moment. So we're looking at different markets and looking at which markets have the ingredients to launch. And the ingredients that we think are critical are, first of all, technology adoption. So that is, do you have a baseline of set-top boxes, connected TV devices, and of course, a broadband infrastructure that is strong enough to support addressability. Secondly is market competition. And having competition in market, we think, is incredibly helpful. So often when you've got a market leader, so for example, Sky with AdSmart in the UK, it really prompts the rest of the market to innovate and innovate quickly. And we think that's really good, in the sense that it forces each of the broadcasters to often collaborate better together. We heard the announcement of BritBox, so BBC and ITV coming together for a joint streaming service just yesterday. And clearly, you have to have this level of collaboration and friendly competition to be able to survive. Thirdly is measurement frameworks. So having solid third-party audience measurement in place that has a good grip and understanding of multi-platform viewing. Really, really, really tough to get this right. And here in Australia, you are definitely kind of leading the way in terms of having a consistent view of audiences across devices. And then lastly is data maturity. So having data available in a way that it can be scalable, that you've got the privacy standards in place and the regulation in place where you can access data and use data in a sensible way. And I think the last thing I'll say is, and this is kind of the really encouraging thing, is I've been coming out to Australia now, I think this is 2.5 years since I first sort of came out here, is Australia really has a lot of these ingredients here in place. It's no accident that it's the second market in the world that we've launched Finecast, is because it really does have a lot of those key framework pieces for success. So with that, I think I'm out of time, but do we have time for questions? Okay.
Just a 30-second answer, but we've seen the smart TV is becoming obviously a place where there will be more scope for reaching people. Guy Bisson at Ampere showed us this morning that more OTT services will need advertising to survive. So are we looking at a battleground soon for the AVOD market, for the free eyeballs for broadcasters? So perhaps they won't have it quite their own way on the TV set in future? I mean, do you hear from OTT services who are actively looking for advertising support?
Definitely, yeah. And I think if you're one of the smaller content players, so let's say you're not a top 1, 2, or 3 national broadcaster, you don't have a huge amount of choice, because as we saw from Guy's research this morning, people will only tolerate a certain number of subscriptions in a household. So what happens then if you're going to be number 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in terms of content choice? Well, you really have to go down the AVOD route. And secondly, as we've also seen from research this morning, the AVOD route also generates higher margins, as we saw from Hulu. So I think, I don't think there's going to be much choice for players other than to really crack the ad-supported app path for the future and get that right. And obviously addressability, as Dave mentioned earlier, is the way to extract more yield from that.
Okay, and it's good news in terms of eyeballs. We all got worried that eyeballs would disappear to SVOD, but you'll get some eyeballs back.
That's what we're seeing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yep. All right. Thank you both very much. Thank you for the research as well.
No problem. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Give that back to you.
Okay.